The issue of dual loyalty has long been a sensitive and complex topic within diaspora Jewish communities. For some, the fear of being perceived as having dual loyalty to both Israel and, say, the United States or Canada or South Africa or France or Australia or Argentina has led Jews to distance themselves from Zionism or reject it altogether. This concern stems from a historical context where Jews have often faced accusations of being more loyal to their religious or ethnic group than to the countries in which they live. Such allegations have roots in anti-Semitic tropes, which have portrayed Jews as inherently foreign or as a fifth column, working against national interests. While many Jews identify strongly with Israel and support its right to exist as a Jewish state, others may feel that their primary allegiance is to another country's principles, which they might perceive as being in conflict with certain aspects of Zionism. Some Jews also find themselves torn between Israel's more right-wing governments and their left-wing views, without understanding that right-wing in Israel and right-wing in another country are two very different positions, based on two very different premises. The bottom line is that Israel shares much in common with Western countries, and so subscribing to Zionism while being a productive citizen of one of these countries is not mutually exclusive. If anything, it is complementary for at least three reasons, including 1. Zionism ensures indigenous rights, a hot topic in many Western countries, of Jews in our historical homeland. 2. Israel as the Jewish state keeps other countries honest about protecting their Jews. If for no other reason than countries do not want Jewish brain drain, should Jews immigrate to Israel if they feel it is much safer for them there? And 3. Israel is on the West's literal front lines, defending it against Islamist death cults, which want to enslave the Western world and either convert or obliterate it. Then are Muslims living in the West, enjoying all that comes with Western rights, liberties, and freedoms, while devoutly practicing Islam. On the surface, the comparison between Jews and Muslims living as citizens or residents in Western countries seems reasonable. Both groups can practice their religion and be productive citizens of whatever country they reside in, without much harm or foul, right? Well, not entirely. In the West, we often group religions together, but this is a massive mistake, because all religions are not created equally. There are some religions which are better, i.e., less harmful than others, just like there are some fruits which are better, i.e., healthier than others. Unlike many other religions, Islam encompasses not only spiritual beliefs and rituals, but also a comprehensive system of laws and governance known as Sharia. This intertwining of religion and politics is evident in the foundational texts of Islam, including the Quran and Hadith, which provide guidance on both personal conduct and societal organization. Political Islam, or Islamism, is another manifestation of Islam as a political doctrine. Islamism refers to movements that seek to integrate Islamic principles into government and public life. Groups like the Muslim Brotherhood or the Ennahda movement have sought to achieve political power through democratic means, advocating for the implementation of Islamic law in the state. One of the clearest examples of Islam functioning as a political doctrine is the concept of the caliphate, which historically represented a unified Islamic state under the leadership of a caliph, who was considered both a political and religious leader. The caliphate, as established after the death of the Prophet Muhammad, was designed to govern the Muslim community by implementing Islamic law, Sharia, across various aspects of life, including economics, social justice, and international relations. Indeed, we already have at least one caliphate in our world, the Islamic Republic of Iran. Iran's government, following the 1979 Islamic Revolution, is based on the principle of Velayat-e-Faqih, or the guardianship of the Islamic jurist, where the supreme leader has both religious and political authority. That said, anyone who has any understanding of this Iranian dictatorship knows that it has about a 5% approval rating amongst Iranians, because of how oppressive, violent, ideological, genocidal, and misogynistic the supreme leader's regime is. Hence why many Iranians who have escaped this bitter, harsh reality not only detest the Ayatollahs, but also strongly support Israel, Iran's self-professed arch-enemy. And yet, many millions of Muslims across the world, including plenty who live in Western countries, explicitly and implicitly desire a world in which there is a larger, more imposing caliphate. These Muslims see the West as a bunch of values-poor, superficial, defective societies which should be replaced as soon as possible by Islamism. Interestingly and frighteningly, the word Islam literally means submission, and the Quran dictates repeatedly that its followers must convert you to Islam or kill you if you refuse to convert. For example, Surah 3:151 says, quote, "We shall cast terror into the hearts of those who disbelieve." And according to Surah 2:191, quote, "Kill them, non-Muslims. Wherever you find them, kill them. Such is the recompense of the disbelievers." End quote. Much of the Quran speaks not about religion, but about how believers must submit, and it commands how they must live, dress, treat women and slaves, and practice jihad. Two things can be true. Parts of Western societies are indeed values-poor and superficial, and replacing them with Islamism would be a disaster for humanity. However, this is precisely what is happening. Islamic organizations and states deliberately encourage emigration from the Middle East, North Africa, and other Muslim-majority countries to Western ones, with the goal of proliferating homegrown Islam, which tends to manifest itself in homegrown terrorism. What's more, Al Jazeera, the Qatari government's obnoxious Islamist mouthpiece, is broadcast to over 150 countries and territories in more than 430 million homes. And Islamists regularly exploit non-profit organizations established in Western countries to recruit operatives, do business, quote-unquote, and fundraise in the millions, perhaps even billions, of dollars for terrorism. Conversely, you don't really see Jewish organizations proliferating homegrown Judaism via emigration from Israel, nor do you see Jewish TV channels promoting and celebrating Judaism's extremist elements, nor are Jews exploiting non-profit organizations for financing and conducting terrorism. Like I said, all religions are not created equal. As a result of these deliberate strategies, Muslims are rising to power in Western democracies to represent the increasing numbers of Muslims in these countries. To be sure, some of these Muslims are fine, law-abiding citizens who simply want to live in peace and quiet, make an adequate living, and ride off into the sunset like a lot of us. But many Muslims do not fit this bill. They are angry at Western societies, often for their own personal problems or circumstances, and desire to infiltrate Western institutions as quote-unquote payback. Indeed, this is already taking place right in front of our eyes. Across education and academia, media, entertainment, and government, the Muslim takeover is promptly gaining steam, often through gaslighting, distortions, manipulations, blackmail, backstabbing, and preying on gullible Westerners. This is not fear-mongering. It is math. Some 25% of the entire world population, 1 in 4 humans, are Muslims. And make no mistake, if it has not already, Islam is coming to a metropolis near you. Anyone who lives in London, Paris, Johannesburg, Toronto, Abuja, and Berlin can vouch for that. In the United States, Hamtramck, Michigan, once a Polish enclave, recently became the first American city with an all-Muslim government. And the Wall Street Journal described Dearborn, Michigan as, quote, America's jihad capital, where imams and politicians routinely cheer on Islamist, genocidal terrorist organizations like Hamas against Israel and the Islamic Republic of Iran against the United States. To add insult to injury, websites like the popular Arab American News praise Hamas and Hezbollah and claim that the U.S. government is, quote, bought by the Zionist lobby. But these incidents do not live in a silo. They strategically work their way into politics and policies at every level of government. Take, for example, the so-called uncommitted national movement in the United States, an organization run by Arab Americans which advocates for voters not to support a Democratic Party presidential candidate unless they support anti-Israel policies, including an arms embargo on the Jewish state. The organization was formed out of the success of the organization Listen to Michigan, which canvassed door to door and operated phone banks during the 2024 Democratic Party presidential primaries, en route to tallying more than 100,000 Democrats who voted uncommitted, rather than for then-candidate President Joe Biden. It was reported this week that the uncommitted national movement has extensive ties to Michigan Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib's family, friends, former colleagues, and supporters. This the same Rashida Tlaib who held up a sign donning a Jewish blood libel, guilty of genocide, while sitting in the U.S. Congress building as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu gave an official speech last month. This week, the uncommitted national movement, whose co-chairs Tlaib's sister, staged a so-called sit-in outside of the Democratic National Convention. And of course, fellow U.S. Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, a Muslim from Minnesota, joined the sit-in shortly after it was erected. It is no coincidence that Holocaust survivor and former Anti-Defamation League National Director Abraham Foxman expressed concern on Wednesday that the situation for Jews in the U.S. had deteriorated to the point that they had to meet in secret at sideline events of the Democratic National Convention. Foxman's concern came after a Jewish event on rising anti-Semitism against Orthodox Jews was disrupted by anti-Israel activists. Brick by brick, wall by wall, Zionism will fall, the activists chanted in a video published online, even though the event had nothing to do with Zionism. Instead, it was targeted for being visibly Jewish. In a Western country that actually respects itself and the interests of the vast majority of its citizens, those who explicitly and implicitly subscribe to Islamism would be unequivocally tried for treason and barred from any level of participation at any political event. This starts with Tlaib and Omar, who parade around the U.S. supporting pro-Hamas, pro-Hezbollah, and pro-Houthis initiatives, as if these terror groups, and not their enemy, Israel, are a staunch American ally. The crime of these so-called Westerners is not being Muslim. It is betraying one's country by attempting to aid its enemies. And we have seen the similar offenses by extremist leftist politicians in Canada, France, Spain, South Africa, Australia, and the UK. Just think about the number of times we have seen Western politicians dressed in keffiyehs, a symbol of Palestinian terrorism, while doing official government business in official government buildings. If Muslims living in the West and their ignorant, corrupted supporters feel so compelled to support Islamism, so be it, but they should be dealt with as such. The Western world cannot afford to indulge them anymore, unless it wants to be engulfed by Islamism.